Hello, everybody. Welcome back to today's top 10 topics of October 30th, 2021. Let us look at the list of topics that I will be discussing with you today. Niti Aayog calls for Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana coverage to the missing middle in a report. This is helpful in GS paper 2 with regard to policies related to the health sector. Suicides among the farm workers rose 18% in 2020. GS paper 2 in vulnerable sections, and it is also an ethical issue. The nationwide PCV campaign was launched today by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. It is helpful in GS paper 2 health. Pradhan Mantri Modi is on his way to attend the G16th G20 summit in Rome, and this is helpful in GS paper 2 International Organizations Regional Forum. US to deepen relations with Taiwan, GS paper 2 International Relations. Goel to push tax on MNC in the country of operation at the G20, GS paper 3 Economic Growth. Karnataka gambling law, ambit and the High Court challenge is an editorial which is important from GS paper 2 with regard to government policies. The Glasgow test is another editorial from the Indian Express, and it is helpful in GS paper 3 Climate Change. Roots of crisis regarding the shortage of phosphatic fertilizers is helpful in GS paper 3 Agriculture, and Driving a New World Order in the Indian Express. This editorial deals with electric vehicles, the policy of the government, and the challenges to adopt these vehicles in India. So, let us start with the topics. Niti Aayog calls for Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana coverage to the missing middle. Now, recently, a report was released by the Niti Aayog. This related to increasing the health insurance coverage in the country. Now, the Niti Aayog report has recommended three models for increasing the health insurance coverage in the country. Recently, I've been discussing with you in the previous slides how the out of pocket expenditure in India is the highest, and this is leading to many people moving into poverty. And therefore, the economic survey of this year called on the government to increase its expenditure on the health sector so that there will be reduction in the out of pocket expenditure. Health insurance is one way in which the out of pocket expenditure for health among the citizens and people of the country can be reduced. So the report highlighted that at least 30% of the population, or numbering 40 crore individuals, which it called as the missing middle, are devoid of any financial protection for health. Niti Aayog has suggested that the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana scheme be extended to cover this section without a health insurance. The report is named as Health Insurance for India's Missing Middle. Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana was launched in September 2018 and provides a comprehensive hospitalization cover to the bottom 50% of the population. Around 20% of the population, which form the rich, are covered through social health insurance and private voluntary health insurance. The remaining 30% of the population, the report says, is devoid of health insurance. The actual uncovered population is higher due to the gaps in Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana and overlapping between the schemes. So, what are the three models that are being suggested by the Niti Aayog? The first model focuses on increasing the consumer awareness of health insurance. The second model is about developing a standardized health insurance product, something like the Arogya Sanjeevani that came about during the COVID-19 pandemic last year in 2020 by the IRDAI. Third model expands government health insurance through the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya scheme to a wider set of beneficiaries, and this model can be utilized for the segments of the missing middle which remain uncovered. A combination of the three models phased in different times can ensure coverage for the missing middle population and thereby reduce their out-of-pocket expenditure. The Niti Aayog also says that to ensure more coverage for health insurance, the government must share the data with the private insurance companies From schemes such as the National Food Security Act, the Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi for agriculture households, so that they can identify those that will lack the insurance and therefore the insurance cover can be increased. The second most important topic is that suicides among the farm workers rose in 18% in 2020, and this report comes from the National Crime Records Bureau. It says that the number of agriculture laborers who died by suicide in 2020 was 18% higher than the previous year. However, the suicide among the land owning farmers dropped slightly during the pandemic year. The farm sector, let me remind you, was one of the bright spots in the Indian economy last year. However, landless agriculture laborers who did not benefit from the income support schemes such as the Pradhan Mantri Kisan might have faced higher levels of distress during the pandemic. The NCRB report does not include any indication of the specific causes of suicide among the farm community. Most of these deaths are among those who work primarily, and the main source of income comes from the labor activities in agriculture or horticulture, says the NCRB. And it also identifies the states that have been worst affected. For example, it is Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh. Giving the data regarding the job hazard, it says that as many 37,000 of the 1.53 lakh people who died by suicide were daily wage earners. Therefore, it depicts the income insecurity among these people. Homemakers accounted for 14.6% of the deaths. Now, daily wage earners constituted 24.6%. Second comes homemakers. Fourth comes self employed. Then the fifth, unemployed. Salaried persons, students constitute 8.2%, farm sector 7, and retired 1. While the data is timely, especially after the pandemic, and therefore the government can bringing about the awareness to the government so that it can take appropriate steps to ensure certain amount of income security to these unorganized sector workers. But the other backlog in the NCRB data is that it does not specify the causes for the suicide. If the causes are also identified, then it will be easier for the government to work on the root cause for these suicide instances. Suicide is an ethical issue, and it paints a very weak picture on the efficiency of governance in the country. Now, Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi is going to attend the 16th G20 summit at Rome, and this is the first in-person summit since the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. They have many important issues on the agenda, and it is being held by Italy, who holds the presidency. So let us look at some of the focus on the G20 meeting. It is identified that the focus points will be global economy, recovery of the global economy from the pandemic, strengthening of global health governance, keeping in mind the once in a century crisis that has attacked the whole world, then economic recovery and resilience, climate change, energy transition, food security, sustainable development. The theme is people, planet, and prosperity, thereby emphasizing sustainable development and planet friendly development. The G20, let me tell you, represents 80% of the world GDP. Therefore, the decisions and the policies of these countries will have a huge impact. It comprises 75% of the global trade, and therefore, the important decisions taken at these will ease the trade among the countries. 60% of the world's population. The decisions will ensure ease of living and also equitable development. Thus, it has emerged as a premier global forum at the global economic cooperation, and an important platform to exchange, innovate, deliberate on issues that will have an impact on the quality of lives. Let us identify the countries: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Republic of Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, United Kingdom, United States, and the European Union. The other big news related to health today is that the nationwide expansion of the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine under the Universal Immunization Program was launched today by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. It said that for the first time, the PCV will be available for universal use across the country. Now, this will reduce child mortality due to pneumonia by around 60%. Noting that pneumonia is a leading cause of death among the children under the age of 5 globally and also in India. Pneumonia is caused by the pneumococcuses and it is the most common cause for severe pneumonia in the children. In India, around 16% of the deaths in children occur due to pneumonia. The nationwide rollout of this vaccine will reduce the child mortality by around 60%. The Universal Immunization Program is one of the largest public health programs targeting close to 26.7 million newborns and 29 million pregnant women annually. Under the Universal Immunization Program, immunization is being provided for free of cost against 12 vaccine preventable diseases. Nationally, against 10 diseases. These are diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, polio, measles, rubella, severe form of childhood tuberculosis, rotavirus, diarrhea, hepatitis B, meningitis, and pneumonia caused by the Haemophilus influenza type B, and subnationally against two diseases, that is pneumococcal pneumonia and the Japanese encephalitis, of which the PCV vaccine is nationally expanded today, while the JE vaccine is provided only in endemic districts. The next most important news is that gold pushes tax on MNC in the country of operation. Now, this was said by the minister before he heads towards the G20 meeting. Now, this is regarding the gaps in the taxation system in the country, and recently it has also been a point of discussion among the G20 countries, along among the OECD countries, that they should bring about a minimum corporate tax so that countries do not lose on their revenue from taxation because of the gaps in the taxation system. So, India is pushing the G20 nations to ensure that multinational corporations pay a minimum corporate tax in the countries in which they operate. A number of countries has raised the issue of large MNCs shifting the profits and the taxes to low tax jurisdictions regardless of where the revenue was generated. India is losing almost about 10.3 billion per year as a result of these moves. These include big tech majors such as Facebook, Google, Amazon that move the profits to low tax jurisdictions such as Ireland, British Virgin Islands, and Panama. India had earlier this year amended the taxation rules to impose a equalization levy of 2% on trade and services by non-resident e-commerce operators with a turnover of 2 crore. The US had retaliated back with tariffs because of the move by India. Now, many countries in the OECD and G20 process are committed to reach a consensus on international tax issues such as these. This is also called as the base erosion and profit share shifting, which refers to tax planning strategies by the multinational enterprises that exploit the gaps and mismatches in tax rules by avoiding paying the tax in the countries. Developing countries who highly rely on corporate tax means that they will suffer disproportionately due to loss of income through these taxes. BEPS practice cost countries some USD 100 to 40 billion in lost revenue annually. Therefore, the OECD and the G20 inclusive framework on BEPS, or the base erosion and profit shifting, calls for collaborating on implementing 15 measures to tackle this tax avoidance, improve the international tax rules, and ensure more transparent tax environment. Therefore, the nations are looking forward, especially on this major development, and India is going to take its stand at the G20. Let us look forward and wait what decisions will be taken. The next important news is about gambling. This is been an uh, it was given in Indian Express today, and it is about a law that has been amended in Karnataka to make all forms of gambling, including online, as cognizable and non-bailable. Now, this has been criticized by from the gaming sector and also political analysis who say that clubbing both the game of skill and the game of chance together violates the basic law. Let us look at what the issue is. Now, a law was passed by the Karnataka despite similar laws in states such as Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Telangana, which have faced legal challenges for broadening the scope of gambling beyond what it has been defined by law. Since the new law came into effect, several online firms have locked their apps and sites with the fear that they will attract police action. So, what are the legal issues raised by these amended laws? One of the primary grounds on which the new gaming laws in Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu has been challenged is that the games of skill have been clubbed with games of chance. In the same definition, gaming companies have argued that as per the law laid down by the Supreme Court in 1957, competitive games of skill which require certain knowledge such as reasoning, logical reasoning, analytical abilities are business activities that are protected under 191G, and therefore clubbing them with the game of chance, which are games which does not need any specific knowledge and are dependent merely on luck, is not the right action to be taken by the Karnataka government. It has been argued that the states do not have the competence to prohibit games of skill and that only games of chance can be regulated for gambling and betting. Then, why did Karnataka amend the law? It says that the police cannot raid the gambling dens since gambling is non cognizable and bailable offence. Also, the recent PIL seeking a ban on online gaming and betting have also triggered the action. It says that gambling in public streets remain cognizable and bailable. It also says that it wanted to include the cyberspace, including the computer resources and other communication devices such as phones defined in the Information Technology Act in the process of gaming to curb the menace of gaming through internet and mobile. Now, the All India Gaming Federation and several companies have approached the Karnataka High Court challenging the amendments. Let me tell you a few points briefly about the gaming in India. Now, gaming is a state subject, and only the states in India are entitled to formulate laws for gambling activities within their respective states. However, there is a central law, Public Gaming Act, that prohibits running or being in charge of public gambling houses. Critics of gambling claim that these lead to crime, corruption, money laundering. However, the Supreme Court itself has made a distinction between the game of skill and game of chance. Now, the Indian law classifies games into two broad categories: game of skill and game of chance. The Information Technology Act, which regulates cyber activities in India, does not mention the word gambling or betting. Thereby, the Act was left for interpretation by the courts, which have refused to examine the matter. Further, online gambling is banned offence in the state of Maharashtra and under the Bombay Wager Act. Recently, Beijing also has enacted new laws to curb video gaming as it has become an addiction amongst the minors in China, and now gamers under the age of 18 will be banned from playing games from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Gamers will also be restricted only 90 minutes on weekdays and 3 hours on weekends and holidays. The Chinese government has also enacted rules to limit spending to 200 yuan a month. Similar laws have been enacted to protect minors in countries like South Korea and Japan, where users are logged out of online games at particular hours or given warnings. The gaming, especially the online gaming industry, has been a part of discussion with regard to children, especially after the PUBG game was banned in India. Now, this has become a social menace, especially for children and many teenagers, and it is a topic of discussion. So in one of my top focus topics, I will be coming up with a detailed discussion on the gambling and also the gaming sector in India. Let me tell you that there has been a debate on whether their gambling should be illegal or regularized in India, but there are both supporters and criticizers for this. We shall look into the same points in my in focus slide in the coming days. And also, gambling has been supported by certain states because it is a form of revenue in the form of casinos, especially in states like Goa, Sikkim, and Daman. The next important issue is Glasgow Desk, which is an editorial given in the Indian Express. Now, the writer, while mentioning that the COP26 is going to be held, also discusses how the COP26 should not be a stalemate and there should be important decisions to be taken during this meeting, because what happened in COP25 at Madrid, where the rule book could not be finalized and there was differences between the developing and developed countries, the same thing should not happen at COP26. The writer says that cooperation and coordination, and especially walking the talk or ensuring that the rule book is finalized, is an even more urgent issue because climate change and global warming related events are already showing their impact. One being the COVID pandemic. And so the writer calls for coordination and cooperation between the developed and the developing countries to finalize the rule book on one hand, to come out with strict policies for emission reduction on the other hand, coming up with the discussions on net zero emissions. And also, there have been criticisms recently that the nationally determined contributions have not been doing much, and even United States has been telling India to increase its commitment in the nationally determined contributions. So all the countries, not only India but all the countries, have to come forward, even more so the countries who are contributing more to the carbon emissions on the whole, but also on the basis of per capita. So the developed countries have to take a greater responsibility because they have finished their path of development, and now it is the time to support the developing and the poor countries in their process of development by ensuring that they transfer the required technology and also supporting them in funding the greener technologies and greener development if they want all the parties to work coordinatedly and with synergy in tackling climate change. So, this is what has been given in this two slides which I have highlighted here. The next most important is an editorial again in the Indian Express which talks about the recent crisis in phosphatic fertilizers. Now this is very important because fertilizers play a very important role in the agriculture sector of not only our country but also worldwide. And now recently during the Rabi season, the states such as Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh have been facing a problem because of the shortage in phosphatic fertilizers. Let us look at what the writer says now. Now he has identified the reasons for the crisis. He has also given why DAP is important, the reasons for the shortage, and how that can be tackled. So on and all, it is a good answer for your mains, especially with regard to the crisis in the fertilizer sector. So an acute shortage of diammonium phosphate has been seen in Haryana, and this has made the farmers desperate who have been protesting. The writer identifies the reasons for the crisis along with providing solutions. He says that the farmers are facing the shortage of phosphatic fertilizers while they prepare for the Rabi season. Now, reports of farmers in Punjab, Haryana, and Madhya Pradesh have been scrambling to procure DAP. While the official data shows that the supplies of DAP for October have been above requirements, opening stocks of both the DAP and complex fertilizers are below usual levels that have to be at the start of the Rabi season. So, why is DAP important? It is a basic nutrient in the Rabi crops. The DAP has to be sprinkled at the time of sowing the crops like mustard and wheat. The farmers say that they need a bag of at least 45 kilos for sowing an acre of land. Any delay in the supply would adversely affect the sowing of the crops. And so the farmers have started turning impatient as they see the lack of supply of fertilizers. The writer very nicely identifies the reason for the rise. Let us look at them. The rise in the global prices of phosphatic fertilizers and the inputs have hurt both the importers and exporters. Though DAP and complex fertilizers are decontrolled, producers and traders have been forced to sell them below the production cost because to make it comfortable for the farmer to purchase them, and the center is covering up the losses through subsidies. Now, the global prices of phosphatics for the last 6 years allow the manufacturers to keep the selling prices stable, while the center has, on the other hand, kept a tight lid on the subsidy. The center's diktat on not hiking the prices has dented the profit margins of the producers and traders. China's recently unexpected move to ban the fertilizer exports after it is facing energy crisis has more so aggravated the situation. Now, the center has been alive to the situation and has hiked the subsidies in May and October, with the subsidy on DAP more than doubling. However, the center does not have more fiscal headroom to increase the subsidies even more. Then, how should the country deal with such a situation? The writer says that the immediate solution appears in allowing manufacturers and importers to moderate the price hikes while expediting imports. Domestic capacities need to be increased to reduce over dependence on imports. The center must see that if any dysfunctional factories of DAP and NPK can be revived, as it is done in the case of urea. Subsidy rates for the locally produced phosphatics need to be fixed higher than those given for imports. And in the long run, nutrient based subsidies can level the playing field between urea, DAP, NPK, allowing decontrolled fertilizer makers hike the prices which are linked to inflation will be beneficial to the market. So these are some of the recommendations to deal with the shortage in the phosphatic fertilizers. Now, the last most important topic for the day is something with regard to EVs, that is electric vehicles, and it comes at a time when when the leaders are meeting and discussing steps for net zero emissions. So, one way to tackle climate change is electric vehicles, as we all know. The writer very nicely identifies the steps that are taken about by the government of India to promote electric vehicles, how the private sector has been adopting faster electric vehicles for use, and also the challenges that India is facing. He also makes a very important point. He says that the world order will now shift to those countries who are in the capacity of producing these electric vehicles and also providing the sufficient infrastructure for them, so for the smooth functioning and adoption of electric vehicles. This editorial is apt for a good answer which you can make as a supporting cause for uh, the electric vehicle policy in the government and the challenges that our country faces. Let us look at some of the major points. So, an electric vehicle operates on electric motor instead of an internal combustion engine and as a battery instead of a fuel tank. Electric vehicles have low running costs as they have fewer moving parts and also are environmentally friendly. In India, this is a very important point to note, the fuel cost for an EV is approximately 80 paisa per kilometer. If you contrast this with the cost of petrol, which is today 107 in Delhi, it comes up to 7 to 8 rupees per kilometer to operate a petrol based vehicle. And this, therefore, is consistent to encourage all of us Indians to switch to electric vehicles. In India, the policy steps have been taken are started from long back. In 2013, the Government of India formulated the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan that committed to ensuring that by 2030, that is 8 years from now, at least 30% of the vehicles on our streets would be electrical. But this deadline is unlikely to be met. The more recent faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicle scheme in 2019 commits to provide incentives in the form of subsidies and supporting technology to encourage manufacturing and purchase of electric vehicles. With a budget of $1.5 billion, the FAME provides a mixture of road and registration tax subsidies for electric vehicle purchasers. Private sector has appreciated the dominance of EV. Companies like Amazon, Swiggy, Zomato, IKEA are deploying EVs for deliveries. Car manufacturers like Mahindra are partnering with consumers like Ola, while Tata Motors is partnering with Blue Smart Mobility in moves that will ensure more EV delivery and ride-hailing services. This point is also important to remember that the EV market in India is projected to reach $700 million in 2025, a dramatic jump from 71 million in 2017, almost a tenfold increase. And after the COP26, once the policies have been decided and every country wants to contribute more to the NDCs, I'm very sure that the government is going to act strong on the adoption of electric vehicles. But before that, let us look at the challenges that India faces and what are the steps that what steps it should work on. For the consumer, there is lack of charging infrastructure in India. EVs are typically powered by lithium-based batteries. These batteries need to be charged every 200 to 250 kilometers or so for a car. Dense proliferation of charging points, therefore, is needed. It takes up to 12 hours to fully charge a vehicle at the owner's home using a light duty slow charger. To compound this technological problem of slow charging, there are only 427 charging stations across the country. It is therefore inadequate in a country as large and densely populated as ours to adopt electric vehicles faster. Therefore, the government needs to work on charging infrastructure and also, let us look at the further points. Charging infrastructure, and as charging infrastructure is going to depend on electricity, improving the supply and efficiency of electricity also needs to be worked on. The largest suppliers of lithium-based batteries are Chinese companies. So, if the writer says that the new global order is emerging to replace OPEC, that is the oil producing nations, one in which those who make and charge EVs will dominate the transportation world. India, therefore, must plan to place itself in this order with better charging infrastructure, battery making factories, and smart incentives for car companies and consumers to adopt electric vehicles on a large scale. Most importantly, we must have uninterrupted electricity supply. For the next revolution in transportation is electric vehicles, and it is already underway. So these are the important points that the writer has made with regard to the electric vehicles, challenges and steps, and how the new world order is going to change from the oil producing countries to those countries who manufacture EV, their batteries, and produce the sufficient infrastructure to run them. This brings me to the end of the top 10 topics of the day. I will be meeting you tomorrow again. Until then, bye bye.